You've been conned by Victorian quacks, and every Hollywood doctor who ever waved a leech on screen bloodletting wasn't some medieval lunacy. It was scientific madness backed by so-called experts. Blame the Victorians and their pompous medical textbooks, plus every period drama pretending sticking a lancet was cutting-edge care. If you believed bloodletting was just medieval superstition leeches for sniffles, a quick vein tap for the plague you've been fed first-rate historical hogwash. The true monster. Galen, the 2nd century medical giant whose four humors myth strangled Western medicine for over 1,000 years, barely questioned until the Renaissance kicked in. Don't just take my word. 19th century British physician Thomas Mather's 1860s medical records read like a leech's fever dream. French barber surgeons from the 18th century even crafted special bleeding bowls uncovered in Parisian trash heaps, real tools. Real gruesome business. Here's the punchline. Victorians confidently drained blood during cholera and flu epidemics, unknowingly fast-tracking patients to the grave. Think a green juice cleanse is extreme. Try a Victorian bleed detox guaranteed, but from this life. Moving from bloodletting, another pervasive belief was that diseases originated from bad air, or miasma. You've been conned by the ultimate urban legend deadly disease drifted in on some sinister breeze. Thank 19th century city planners and those arrogant Victorian so-called experts for twisting your fear of bad air into disastrous urban policy. Everyone parrots that plagues crept in on foul fogs, as if coughing was punishment for breathing the wrong alley at midnight. Blame Victorian England and centuries-old textbooks for inflating the miasma myth cities, wasted fortunes battling phantom smells instead of targeting real germs. Even Florence Nightingale, in her 1850s nursing diaries, preached the dangers of night air, not invisible microbes. Then came the ultimate truth bomb, Jon Snow, yes, not a Game of Thrones Stark, who in 1854 mapped London's cholera outbreak and exposed contaminated water as the actual killer. His map still torments science textbooks today. Here's the kicker: by obsessively sealing windows, Victorians accidentally sparked the world's deadliest home fragrance craze. If you ever blamed a stinky subway car for your cold, congratulations, you just lived your own Victorian fantasy. Alongside these air-based theories, many thought medieval people never washed and lived in filth, contributing to illness. Hollywood lied to you, and your high school history teacher fell for it too. The image of medieval Europe as a filthy wasteland crawling with mud-caked peasants is one of the biggest scams ever sold on screen. Brace yourself, your whole idea of the dirty Middle Ages is about to get wiped clean. Let me guess you see grimy villagers wallowing in muck, right? Blame Victorian writers and shiny Robin Hood films. They dialed up the dirt to make their own times seem spotless. But here's the kicker. The 15th century Regimen Sanitatis Salernitanum was a medieval bestseller that told everyone, yes, peasants too, to bathe regularly and keep clean. Need proof? Excavations in York during the 1990s uncovered medieval homes with soapstone sinks and actual drainage systems, built for frequent washing, not at all the water-fearing myth. So if you believed medieval people never washed, congrats, you have worse hygiene knowledge than they had personal hygiene. Maybe it's time to try a Tudor-inspired natural Castle Glow skincare routine. Your ancestors would laugh at your excuses. Beyond cleanliness, health was also thought to depend on balancing the body's humors. Hollywood lied ancient medicine wasn't just some simple Greek genius at work. Nope! The Renaissance hospitals are the real culprits, the ultimate Pinterest fails of healthcare, who supercharged the four humors myth into dangerous dogma. If you believed health was all about balancing blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile because Hippocrates started it, think again. Toga wearers debating bodily fluids. That's pure fantasy centuries off. It was Renaissance doctors who weaponized this quirky idea, bulldozing logic with the subtlety of a caffeinated goose. By the 16th century, hospital designs explicitly segregated patients by humor imbalance, according to Jonathan Andrews' The Healing Environment, 2003. Venetian documents from 1560 detail diets, bloodletting, even color-coded robes as treatment. Milan's Ospedale Maggiore kept bloodletting bowls and instructions well into the 17th century. If you're still buying the humor's hype, congrats, you'd be right at home in a Renaissance ER. But seriously, leave your leeches and bile at home. Unlike outdated medicine, your smartphone deserves better. In pursuit of balancing humors, drastic procedures like drilling into skulls were believed to cure various ailments. You've been sold a horror movie lie. Drilling holes in skulls wasn't some medieval torture nightmare. It's an ancient, surprisingly effective surgery. Blame lurid Hollywood flicks and melodramatic Victorian writers for twisting trepanation into a Black Plague slasher just to sell tickets and penny dreadfuls. The deadly myth. Trepanation cutting into skulls was a last-ditch, medieval horror only done on the doomed. Hollywood gleefully paraded shrieking victims and bumbling sadistic surgeons, turning medieval medicine into a carnival of pain. Here's the brutal truth. Archaeological digs in Peru and Ukraine uncovered skulls with clean trepanation holes, showing bone regrowth proof patients survived. And this dates back over 7,000 years. Check the Peru studies from the 1990s. Even Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine in the 5th century BCE, praised trepanation as sensible, not savage. If you swallowed the old tale of ancient butchers hacking away, congrats, movie myths nailed you again. Honestly, some Neolithic folks had better post-op recovery than your average weekend warrior hobbling home from Sunday football. Shifting from invasive treatments, some myths emphasize diet, like the belief that drinking milk is essential for strong bones. You've been played by a slick white mustache. Hollywood lied, and dairy ads have been hammering the same bogus line: drink milk, or your bones will snap like twigs. If you believe this, get ready to have your mind cracked open. This milky myth was brewed by cunning marketers, not medical pioneers. The lie. Skip milk, and your skeleton turns into a brittle wreck. Blame the ruthless got milk. Campaigns and post-war American dairy lobbyists who spun this tale harder than 19th century doctors, many of whom insisted cow's milk was meant for calves, not humans. Back in the late 1800s, the British Medical Journal declared you could get all the calcium you need from cabbage, sardines, and hold your disbelief: dark leafy greens, no cow juice required. Jump to the Harvard School of Public Health in 2015. People in East Asia, where milk is about as common as a unicorn frappuccino, don't suffer more bone fractures. Need ancient proof. Bronze Age skeletons studied by archaeologist Richard H. Steckel show femurs tougher than today's milk chuggers before daily dairy was even a thing. Still pouring that glass? Congratulations, Madison Avenue has you whipped harder than fresh cream. At the same time, biological treatments such as the use of leeches were employed, though now thought to be nothing but quackery. You've been fed a blood-sucking lie. Blame Victorian melodrama for that. We all scoff at those creepy old doctors plastering leeches everywhere, but Hollywood and textbooks turned leeches into the ultimate medieval joke. Think again, your mind's about to get bitten. If you believed leeches were just the medieval version of useless essential oils, some desperate, idiotic quackery, you've swallowed a fairy tale. Every period drama and smug science textbook parroting that image owes it to Victorian writers obsessed with mocking so-called barbaric eras. Here's the bombshell. In the early 19th century, French doctor François Broussais penned entire scientific treatises on leech therapy. Don't take my word, dive into his feverish writings circa the 1800s. Archaeology and modern clinical trials reveal leech medicine wasn't blind guesswork. It was targeted, experimental, and often surprisingly effective. Still skeptical. Plastic surgeons today depend on leeches to save crushed fingers and ears. After intricate surgery, check the late 20th century medical journals, not just Gray's Anatomy. So if you thought leeches were medical nonsense, congratulations, you're about as accurate as a cartoon plague doctor. Modern medicine still occasionally powered by squishy, glorified worms. Someone should have warned you it's weirder than a TikTok health guru endorsing snake oil. Beyond treatments, misconceptions also surrounded illness causes, such as the idea that catching a cold leads directly to the flu. You've been brainwashed by generations of grandmothers and every cold remedy commercial since the Victorian era. Wrap up your neck or you'll catch your death. They warn. But is your neck really the battlefield against viruses? If you believed that freezing winter air guarantees a sniffle and days trapped under the covers, you've fallen for a century-old hoax. This myth exploded in the rigid Victorian era when doctors blamed bad airs and mysterious humors for illness. Here's the shocker, the real villain. Viruses, not frosty breezes. Benjamin Franklin, the original science rebel, sat in a freezing wet room in the 18th century to test this nonsense and stayed perfectly healthy, according to his own letters. Fast forward to the 1960s, when researchers confirmed you only catch a cold if you meet a virus, not from shivering your socks off. So if you thought burrowing in scarves made you invincible, congrats, you've just been outsmarted by an 18th century kite flyer. Unless scarves magically block viruses like Wi-Fi signals, your granny's been waging a fashion war on germs completely unarmed. Similarly, myths extended to pregnancy, where old wives' tricks were believed to predict a baby's sex. You've been straight up lied to about baby genders, and you can blame gossiping Victorians and your grandma's kitchen witchcraft. That whole pendulum over the belly stunt. It's superstition parading as science. Any bored ant will tell you that. Everyone's heard it dangle a needle on a string, watch it swing, and presto, boy or girl revealed. If you believe this, you might as well read tea leaves. Royal gender betting isn't just some TikTok nonsense. Medieval European courts literally gambled on it, fueled by zero proof and pure wishful thinking. Victorian household experts like Mrs. Beeton pushed bogus checklists craving sweets means a girl salt, a boy. Those pages aren't guides, they're comedic relief. Actual medieval medicine, like the 14th century Trotula treatise, claimed red cheeks equal boy-lifting wisdom from horoscopes and spice racks, not biology. Modern science. By 1998, The Lancet demolished these folk myths. They're as accurate as a coin toss. If Grandma's pendulum really worked, she'd be a stock market guru with billions, not guessing baby genders. From prenatal beliefs, myths also touched on child behavior, including the claim that sugar makes kids hyper. You've been duped by snack ads and clueless parents. Hollywood lied to you, making sugar the scapegoat for every playground meltdown. For decades, everyone swallowed the myth that handing a kid a cupcake was like lighting a fuse to dynamite. This sugar panic exploded in the late 20th century, pumped up by shrill TV commercials and preachy mom blogs screaming sugary snacks turn angels into gremlins. Movies like Problem Child and even school lessons hammered the message that birthday chaos boiled down to sugar. Never boring truths like sleep deprivation or unfiltered excitement. Here's the cold, inconvenient truth. A landmark 1994 double-blind study in the New England Journal of Medicine blew the lid off this lie. Kids given sugar acted no wilder than those handed placebos with sugar-free sugar pills. Follow-up studies in the early 2000s nailed it. The parents' expectations, not candy, fueled the myth. Believing sugar flips kids into hyperdrive. That's as ridiculous as blaming Wi-Fi for your chronic procrastination. If you've blamed Skittles for your cousin's curtain acrobatics, congrats, you've been masterfully played. When it came to medical procedures, it was commonly believed that surgery before anesthesia was always agony. You've been fed lies by Victorian-era playwrights and lazy Hollywood hacks. The brutal medieval surgery myth before anesthesia is total fiction. Blame the Victorians and every black and white movie director who smeared fake blood and sweaty faces on screen. You probably imagine early surgery as endless screaming and gnawed leather straps. But here's what those sensationalists hid from you. Painkillers predate most pyramids. The ancient Egyptians, around 1500 years before Christ, concocted opium potions for surgery. Check the 16th century BCE Ebers Papyrus. Chinese doctors in the 2nd century knocked patients out with wine and herbal sedatives, thanks to Huatuos records. And the medieval Islamic pioneer al-Zahrawi was mixing mandrake anesthesia in the 11th century, while Europe was still figuring out basic hygiene. If you believed history's operating rooms were just torture scenes ripped from Saw without the storyline, congrats, you just booked a starring role in a Victorian horror myth. How absurd is that? It's like insisting airplanes never flew till the Wright brothers because everyone's seen old cartoons of people flapping wings. Despite such pain, some protective measures like plague doctors' beaked masks were thought to offer effective protection. Hollywood lied to you. Plague doctors were not medieval hazmat heroes. If you believe that creepy bird beak mask was some genius biohazard armor, you've been duped by lazy Halloween costume shops and overhyped Victorian novelists peddling superstition as science. Movies, costume catalogs, and especially 19th century writers spun the myth that plague doctors were noble germ fighters, yet germ theory didn't even exist until centuries later. The iconic beak. It's a 17th century invention credited to Charles de Lorme, physician to Louis XIII, not medieval Black Death warriors. Actual historical evidence, like the 1650s Avignon engravings, show plague doctors in plain cloaks, not bird mask cosplay. That protection was just a beak stuffed with herbs, completely useless against airborne infection. Jean-Jacques Manget, 1829 medical treatise exposes how powerless that costume really was. Still think breathing through potpourri and a bird mask stops deadly pandemics? Then congrats, you're pandemic ready with a scented candle and a Party City coupon. Meanwhile, scientific understanding was muddled by the myth that life could arise spontaneously from nothing. Hollywood lied. Life does not just burst from your dinner plate. Renaissance thinkers actually believed lasagna could spawn new life. Yes, the same geniuses behind Michelangelo also gave us maggot pasta. Thanks, misguided centuries-old science. For centuries, fools insisted maggots, frogs, even mice magically popped out of meat, mud, or your forgotten spaghetti. This absurd myth began with 17th century figures like Jean-Baptiste van Helmont, who shockingly penned recipes to grow mice from sweaty rags. Everyone cooks, scholars, and the earliest so-called scientists saw flies on rotting meat and hailed it as a miracle, not the disgusting truth. Then came Francesco Redi, the Italian mythbuster of 1668, who sealed meat in gauze jars and proved it zero maggots, zero spontaneous life. Check his esperienze intorno alla generazione degli insetti. This delusion dogged science until Louis Pasteur crushed it in the late 19th century once and for all. So if you ever bought into spontaneous generation, congrats, you'd be a disastrous chef and a nightmare lab partner. If pasta could actually birth life, Olive Garden would be the Jurassic Park of maggots. In the realm of physical possibility, many thought breaking the 4-minute mile was physically impossible. You've been brainwashed by white-coated experts and clueless sports commentators for decades. Medical authorities once screamed that breaking a 4-minute mile would explode your lungs. Then Hollywood turned this quackery into riveting drama. They twisted human limits into immutable biological law. But guess what? They were dead wrong. For years, they preached that no one could run a mile under 4 minutes without collapsing mid-stride. Time magazine and Olympic officials echoed this myth like it was gospel. A 1940s Journal of the American Medical Association article warned of human structural limitations. If you dared to run too fast, real doctors threatened heart ruptures and spaghetti legs. Then, in 1954, Roger Bannister shattered the so-called unbreakable barrier and casually walked off the track alive. His Oxford training notes still archived, proving that guts plus science crush the herd mentality. After Bannister, scores smashed the limit. If you bought into the idea that breaking 4 minutes would kill you, congrats, you just failed biology and physics in one breathless stride. It's like believing your smartphone's battery dies if you use it after midnight. Turning to health, another old myth blamed toothaches on tiny worms residing in teeth. Hollywood lied. Your toothache is not caused by evil little worms crawling through your teeth. If you believed that ancient myth every time you bit something cold and winced, guess what? You just fell for a millennia-old global prank. For thousands of years, humans from ancient Sumerians to your grandma swore tiny worms were munching on their molars. This isn't some cartoon nonsense, it's literally etched in ancient history. 7th century BCE Sumerian clay tablets boldly blamed toothaches on toothworms. The myth slithered straight into the Middle Ages, featured in the 15th century Leech Book of Bald with bizarre recipes to evict these phantom invaders. Even the Victorians, yes, those inventors of terrifying tooth fairies, held worms responsible for dental disasters. Then science crashed the worm party in 1728. Pierre Fauchard's groundbreaking book Le Chirurgien Dentiste revealed bacteria, not wriggling parasites, as the true villains. So if you're still picturing earthworms in your mouth, your dentist called, they're genuinely worried. Sometimes, the most absurd explanations burrow deepest, like believing your Wi-Fi is haunted instead of just slow. Finally, in terms of nutrition, it was believed that eating carrots could enable one to see in the dark. You've been flat-out played, and not just by your mom. The Hollywood-fueled myth that carrots unlock night vision. Blame British spies and World War II propaganda for that sneaky lie. If you bought into the idea that munching carrots turns you into a Batman-level nocturnal hero, think again. The real scam. British intelligence in the 1940s cooked up this carrot story to hide their groundbreaking radar technology. They fooled the public into believing pilots could spot Nazis at night, thanks to veggies. Not cutting-edge science. Don't take my word for it, wartime Ministry of Food posters and British newspapers blasted carrot propaganda everywhere. Actual experts, like those in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 1998, confirm vitamin A only prevents serious night blindness. It does not grant superhero vision. If carrots truly gave night vision, we'd have rabbits starring in spy thrillers. So next time your mom says, "Eat your carrots," ask her if she's working for MI6.